Okay, good to see everyone today. We're nearing the end of the book of Judges. I haven't gotten the book of Samuel yet in this edition, but it's on my list to do because we're not going to finish. Yeah, we still have two more chapters after this one, so we're not going to finish today, but we will finish. We will finish chapter 19 today. So. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So last time we stopped on page 302 of this edition, which is chapter 19, at the end of verse 22. We had read verses 10 to 22, but had not looked at the commentary yet. So what I want to do is quickly read from verse 1 of chapter 19, just so that we remember what the story is, and then we'll look at the commentary on verses 10 to 22. Okay? So let's turn back to page 296, the beginning of chapter 19. And it came to pass in those days, when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite sojourning on the farther side of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine played the harlot against him, and went away from him unto her father's house to Bethlehem in Judah, and was there the space of 4 months. Okay, we had talked about this before. And her husband arose and went after her, to speak kindly unto her, to bring her back, having his servant with him and a couple of asses. And she brought him into her father's house. And when the father of the damsel saw him, he rejoiced to meet him. And his father-in-law, the damsel's father, retained him. So there was a question also, why is the Bible referring to her as a concubine? And now there's a father-in-law. What is she a wife? Is she a concubine? What's the story here? Why is he going after her if she was unfaithful to him? Why is the father-in-law treating him nicely if he possibly wants to protect the daughter-in-law, his daughter from his son-in-law? So anyway, at verse 5, and it came to pass on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning, and he arose to depart. And the damsel's father said unto his son-in-law, Stay thy heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward you shall go your way. So they sat down and did eat and drink, both of them together. And the damsel's father said unto the man, Be content, I pray thee, and tarry all night, and let thy heart be merry. And the man rose up to depart, but his father-in-law urged him, and he lodged there again. And he rose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart. And the damsel's father said, Stay thy heart, I pray thee, and tarry ye until the day declineth. And they did eat, both of them. And when the man rose up to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the damsel's father, said unto him, Behold, now the day draweth toward evening. Tarry, I pray you, all night. Behold, the day groweth to an end. Lodge here, that thy heart may be merry, and tomorrow get you early on your way, that thou mayest go home. But the man would not tarry that night, but he rose up and departed, and came over against Yavus, the same as Jerusalem. And there were with him a couple of asses saddled. His concubine also was with him. When they were by Yavus, the day was far spent. The servant said unto his master, Come, I pray thee, let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites, and lodge in it. And his master said unto him, We will not turn aside into the city of a foreigner, that is not of the children of Israel, but we will pass over to Gibeah. And he said unto his servant, Come, let us draw near to one of these places, and we will lodge in Gibeah or in Ramah. So they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down upon them near to Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned aside thither to go in to lodge in Gibeah, and he went in and sat him down in the broad place of the city, for there was no man that took them into his house to lodge. All right, so we talked also a little bit as I was reading it this last time. We didn't look at the commentary yet. Just the idea of uh, bringing in guests into your home. And we have two examples in the Torah of Abraham doing this and his nephew Lot doing this. We don't have other examples in the Bible so far about what's expected of hosts to do for travelers or people approaching them about feeding them and staying the night. So we have the example of Abraham and Lot. We don't have others. So it's this Levite who is traveling with his wayward concubine or wife and a servant and animals. He is afraid of staying the night in the Jebusite city of Jerusalem because King David hadn't conquered it yet, hadn't made it his capital yet. So he's afraid to stay there the night. So he wants to be in an Israelite city. So he goes to the town of Gibeah, which is in the tribe of Benjamin, and no one's taking him in. So this could be a value comment on the people of Benjamin. Look how terrible they are. They are selfish. They are not hospitable to the traveling, their fellow traveling Israelites. Okay? 16, and behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at even. Now the man was of the hill country of Ephraim, and he sojourned in Gibeah, but the men of the place were Benjaminites. So this old man, who happens to be from the same place where this Levite is from, the hill country of Ephraim, happens to be a resident of Gibeah, and he's the one now who's going to offer hospitality. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the wayfaring man in the broad place of the city, and the old man said, Whither goest thou? And whence comest thou? And he said unto him, We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah unto the farther side of the hill country of Ephraim. From thence am I, and I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and I am now going to the house of the Lord, and there's no man that takes me into his house. In other words, so we have to remember from chapter 18 and 17 that there's this alternative house of the Lord set up by this judge named Micah in the hill country of Ephraim, and he got a Levi to serve in that house of God. It's not we're not told it's a house of idolatry. It's just an alternative house of God to where the Mishkan is in Shiloh, we presume. Okay, so the Levite says to this old man, I'm going back home to the hill country of Ephraim, and nobody has taken me in. 19, we're on 301, and yet there's both straw and provender for our asses. In other words, I don't need people to feed me or my animals. I have enough. And there's bread and wine also for me. I got my own food. And for thy handmaid and for the young man that is with thy servants, there's no want of anything. And the old man said, Peace be unto thee, howsoever, let all thy wants lie upon me. Don't worry, don't waste your food. I'll take care of you. Only lodge not in the broad place. So he brought him into his house and gave the asses fodder, and they washed their feet and did eat and drink. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain base fellows, beset the house round about, beating at the door. And they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth the man that came into thy house, that we may know him. So this is where we left off last time. And I just want to point out again, what the people of Benjamin, these men, are doing around the house reminds us of the story with Lot and the angels in the city of Sodom. This is a couple of portions ago, and we talked about it in the Torah study class a couple weeks ago, and how the people of the city were surrounded Lot's house, knocking on the door, demanding that Lot release the two visitors who were there. And we have to remember from that story that Lot protects his guests and offers to the people of the city instead his two daughters, his two virgin daughters, to the people surrounding the house. Okay? So clearly, the author of this story is counting on us to remember that story from the Torah. Okay? So there's similar elements here. So you got an old man who who's an outsider in the town of Gibeah, is the only one who is offering hospitality. Lot is also an outsider to the city of Sodom, only one offering, he offers hospitality to the angels because the angels come directly to him. It's not like Lot is seeing the angels just roaming the streets looking for a place to stay. So it's a slightly different element of the story. But we have people of Sodom surrounding Lot's house. People of Gibeah are surrounding this old man's house, demanding that the old man release his guest. Okay, so that's where we left off. Let's look at the commentary on verses 10 through 22, beginning on the bottom of 299. Yevus, they were on the bottom right, a name given to Jerusalem, see 1 Chronicles 11, probably with reference to its non-Israelite population, the Jebusites. That it was not the older name of the city is manifest from the Amarna letters, where Uru Salim is often found. So, the Amarna letters, Amarna was this town in probably Syria today. The interesting article, by the way, in Times of Israel about Jewish sites in Syria and how they have been neglected under Assad and the Assad family for the past 50 some odd years, and whether now there would be an opportunity for archaeologists and others to go back to those sites and restore them. In fact, there's a lot of Jewish sites that go back to the time of the Romans, because, the Bible talks about Syria. Abraham is from there. He sends his servant there to find a wife for Isaac. So Rebecca is from there. Rachel and Leah are from there. So it's ancient. The city of Damascus, one of the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world. And there's Jewish stuff all around Syria. The Aleppo Codex, just Google that. The oldest manuscript of the Bible that we have, 1,000 years old, Aleppo, major city in Syria. So lots of Jewish sites there. There's a town with the Roman name Duro Europa that has one of the oldest synagogues that I think is from the turn of the millennia. That is like from around the year 0 or the 100s, around that time, has important murals and mosaics in it. You can Google Synagogue Duro Europa to see the pictures. I remember taking a class at a rabbinic convention or a conference about it, seeing those pictures. Fascinating stuff that's there. That synagogue has been ransacked, and other synagogues have been ransacked. And so what was my point in bringing that up? Oh, yeah, the Amarna. That's the note here. So Amarna is another ancient town there's like a library of cuneiform tablets has been found there by archaeologists decades ago, and they shed light on the development of Hebrew, and they shed light on place names and people's names that are in the Torah. So there's a town called Uru Salim that is mentioned, which sounds very similar to Yerushalayim. Urusalim sounds like Yerushalayim. Okay, so I'm not an expert on the Amarna letters, but you can Google that too to find out more information about that. So the idea that it's referred to Yavus and not to Urusalim or Yerush, like, because in the Torah, the Malki Tzedek, the king of Shalem, which scholars think is the same place, so there it's called Shalem and not Yavus. So it's just questions about the provenance of that city. Okay, we go on in the commentary. By, literally with, far spent, literally gone down exceedingly. The uncommon form rod for yarad is explained as having belonged to the Hebrew language of the period. The city of a foreigner, he would rather spend the night among Israelites. We're on 300 now, his reliance for safety on his own people exposes the villainy of the Benjaminites the more glaringly. Gibeah, literally hill, a name borne by many towns. This was of Benjamin, identified with Tel El Ful, a hill nearly 3,000 feet above sea level, about 4 miles north of Jerusalem. Ramah, the modern Er Ram, about 5 miles from Jerusalem. The sun went down in the east. The interval between sunset and darkness is very brief. Therefore, they did not proceed as far as Ramah, but sought accommodation in Gibeah. They turned aside. The verb is appropriate because the village lay to one side of the main road. Sat him down. There were no inns in the town, and travelers had to depend on offers of hospitality. The broad place, located just within the city gate in the center of the city. Took, literally gathered. Of the hill country of Ephraim, hospitality was not offered by a Benjaminite, but by a man who sojourned there. This is one of several features of resemblance between the incident and the experience of the angels in Sodom. That's what I was talking about. This man was too old and conditioned to be influenced by his bad neighbors. Moreover, he remained aloof from the Benjaminites, both by his awareness that he was a stranger and by the fact that he was occupied with his work most of the day. 301, whither thou goest, etc. Arabs still ask the same questions of a stranger. The house of the Lord, that is to Shiloh. There is both straw, etc. He meant that he required nothing but shelter. Peace be unto thee. The implication of the words is do not worry. Wash their feet. See Genesis 18 and 19. To do this was very welcome to men who wore sandals. Base fellows, verse 22, literally men of the sons of worthlessness. The grammatical construction is explained as the substitution of a genitive for the apposition. Okay, grammar stuff, don't need to worry about that. Beating, the hit pa'el conjugation instead of the kal may denote an unseemly eagerness. Just the way the verb form describing knocking on the door. So there's the verb form reflects an unseemly eagerness in the knocking. We may know him, 302, the citizens were addicted to unnatural vice. Okay, yeah. Alrighty. Okay, so let's look at ancient Israel on this. Yeah, so we're on page 204 in ancient Israel. The pair of saddled donkeys. At the end of the story, one of them will carry a grisly load on its back. 205, we shall not turn aside to a town of strangers. In the event, this consideration proves to be a bitter delusion because Israelites will behave more barbarically to them than any strangers. Hey, we have to know the end of the story to understand this. Like he's afraid, this Levite with the concubine, and is afraid of going into the city of Yavus because of what might happen to them. And he thinks they'll be safe in an Israelite city. But we're supposed to know that something terrible is going to be happening to them that will happen to them by Israelites. And he said to his lad, 13, the repetition of the formula for introducing speech indicates that the servant is perplexed or disturbed by what his master says, but has no way of answering him. Why, he must be thinking, does he insist that we move on when the only reasonable thing to do would be to seek refuge in this nearby Jebusite town? But there was no man to take him in. This is the first signal of the network of allusions to the story of the visit of the two divine messengers to Sodom in Genesis 19. The man was from the high country of Ephraim, pointedly the sole person in Gibeah prepared to honor the civilized obligation of hospitality is not a Benjaminite. To the house of the Lord, this is a little odd because there's no indication that he lives in a sanctuary back in the far reaches of the high country of Ephraim. Also, instead of the preposition el, to, the text shows an accusative particle, et. Many, following the Septuagint, the Greek translation, amend the two Hebrew words here to read, to my house. Okay. 206, only all your lack is upon me. The old man refuses the Levite's offer to bring his own provisions into the house. Only do not spend the night in the square. The old man knows how dangerous it would be to spend the night outside, exposed to the lubricious townsmen. The parallel with the story of Lot and his two daughters begins to become explicit. 22, they were making good cheer. As before, this is a mood idiom associated with eating and drinking. Worthless men, this judgmental phrase is added to the verbatim quotation from Genesis 19. Bring out the man that we may know him. This is a direct quotation of Genesis 19:5, except that there the plural men appears because there are two of them. The gang rapists' preference here is heterosexual, since they would probably have been aware that the stranger was traveling with a young woman. Okay, so now let's get to the meat of the story. 23. Vayetze alehem ha'ish ba'al habayit. Vayomer alehem. So we're on 302, verse 23. Vayomer alehem. Al achai al tareuna. Acharei asher ba ha'ish hazeh el biti. Al ta'asu et hanevala hazot. So the man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said to them, my brothers, please don't do this terrible thing. The na here is not just please. I pray you, don't do this terrible thing. Since this man has come to my house, don't do this terrible thing. So in other words, he understands, though it hasn't been made explicit to us. Well, he said, the people say, we want to know these men. So they're explicit enough for him, for the man of the house, this old man, to know what they want to do with him. Don't do this terrible thing, or in the English, this wanton deed. 24, Hine viti habetula ufilag shehu otsi ana otam ve'anu otam va'asu lahem hatov be'enechem ve'la'ish hazeh lo ta'asu devar hanevala hazot. So now we wonder again. Lot offers his two daughters to these men who are banging on the doors in the Genesis story. And now here, this old man is saying, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. So this old man is offering this traveler's concubine and his own daughter. I'll bring them out to you, and you can, it says you can humble them. It's humbling them in the form of raping, okay? It's that kind of humbling. You can have your way with them and do whatever is good in your eyes to them. But to this man, don't do this terrible thing. Okay. Yes, Bess?
I'm a little concerned. On line 24, the first phrase,
yes,
my daughter, and not my concubine.
Right, exactly. There's two people. It's his
And,
daughter he's offering.
and his concubine.
No, and this guy, the traveler's concubine.
Ah,
Yes.
ah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes. So that's the concubine we know from the story so far. And the daughter we haven't met yet. And the old man is saying that he has a daughter. Okay? So again, we have to wonder at this kind of offer. What's going on here? Clearly, it's related to what happened in Genesis, and there we have to wonder too why Lot was offering his two daughters to these evil men. At 25, Velo avu ha'anashim lishmoa lo, vayachazek ha'ish befilagsho, vayotze alehem hachutz, vayedu ota, vayit alelu va, kol halayla ad haboker, vayeshalchuha ba'alot hashachar. So the men did not want to listen to him, and they held on to, no, and the man held on to his concubine and brought her. Okay, so the man, the traveling man, no, well, yes, it seems like it's the traveling man brought out his concubine outside, and they, that is the men outside, knew her, that is, had their way with her, and abused her all night until the morning, and then they threw her aside at dawn. Yeah. 26. Vatavo ha'isha lifnot haboker, vatipol petach beit ha'ish, asher adoneh hasham ad ha'or. So the woman, when it became morning, fell onto the door of the house of the man where her master was, when it was till it was light. Vayakom Adoneha baboker, vayiftach daltot habayit, vayetze lalechet ledarko, vehine haisha pilagsho nofelet petach habayit, v'yadeha al hasaf. So her master got up in the morning, opened the doors of the house, and went out to go on his way. And here is the woman, his concubine. So it's unclear whose concubine it is. It could be the old man's concubine and not the traveler's concubine. It's unclear. So he sees this woman, his concubine, falling at the entrance to the house, and her hands are on the threshold. 28. Vayomer elaha, kumi v'nelcha v'ein oneh, vayikacheha al hachamor, vayakom ha'ish vayelech limakomo. So he said to her, "Get up and we'll go." But none answered. I'm not sure what that means. So if it means she didn't answer, it should be ve'ein ona, not ein oneh. So I'm not sure what this means, but none answered. And he took her on the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. 29. Vayavo el beito, vayikach et hama'achelet, vayachazek befilagsho, vayintacheha la'atzameha lishnei masar netachim, vayeshalcheha bechol gevul Yisrael. Which means, and this is the whole point of the story, he brought her to his house. He took the knife Now, this word for knife is from the story with Abraham and Isaac. Okay, that knife that Abraham brought in order to slaughter an animal on the top of Mount Moriah. So he took the knife and grabbed onto his concubine and cut her to the bone in 12 pieces and sent it through and sent them, that is each of the 12 pieces, throughout all the borders of Israel. So in other words, each piece to each tribe. So 12 pieces, one for each tribe, tribal territory. 30, V'haya kol haro'eh ve'amar lo nihirta ve'lo nir'ata kazot lemiyom alot b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim ad hayom hazeh simu lachem aleha utsu vedaberu. And so it should be that all who would see would say, there's nothing like this has been seen. There was nothing like this, and nothing was seen like this from the day that the people of Israel went out of Egypt until this day. Pay attention to it, consider it, and speak. Okay, so it seems that because of the abuse of this woman by the Benjaminites, that this is seen as a not only an act of perversion, but it's an act against what was done. It would be one thing if the people, after they abused her, cut her into pieces. The fact that her husband owner is the one cutting her into pieces, why did he have to do that? He's the one who sent her out in the first place for these men to have their way with her. So it's unclear is it the old man who is sending her out? Or is it the owner who is sending her out? So the ish, it's called an ish. So we don't know which ish is doing it, and so it's unclear.
Wait, it says the master of the house.
Right.
In 22.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 23.
In 23, right. The master of the house is talking to them, but who is the one that is, who's the one holding on to his concubine? So is it the old man in the house, or is it this traveling Levite and his concubine? So that's unclear from the story. We'll see. Alter will make sense of it. And also, but the point of the story is the imagery of cutting the concubine into 12 pieces, perhaps as a reminder of the evil of the Benjaminites.
I'm kind of a little put off by the fact that the two men go to sleep.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's another part of the
She
story.
might have been calling out.
Right. She could have been. Right. Yes. So let's look at the commentary here. There's not much. And then we'll look at Alter on this. We'll read his translation too. So hopefully he'll clarify the pronouns. Okay, so 302 on the bottom, 24. The resemblance of this verse to Genesis 19:8 is striking. Brought her forth, thinking that the men would be attracted by her beauty. It was a dastardly act to save himself in this manner. When the day began to spring, literally in the ascent of the dawn, when the first trace of light appeared in the sky. The dawning of the day, literally as the turning of the morning. To go his way, bottom of 303, it's not to be assumed that he meant to leave the town without recovering the woman. Up and let us be going, he evidently thought that she was alive. None answered, there was no response from her. The man rose up, he returned to his home, taking the body with him. Limb by limb, literally according to her bones. Sent her as Saul did with the oxen in 1 Samuel 11, throughout all the borders to rouse the horror and indignation of all Israel. Has not happened, namely, the brutal treatment of the woman. Okay, so let's read and alter first above the line his translation, and then we'll look below the line. So we're on 206. And the man who was the master of the house went out to them and said, No, my brothers, no, pray do no harm. Seeing that this man has come into my house, do not do this scurrilous thing. Here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me, pray, bring them out and rape them and do to them whatever you want. But to this man do not do this scurrilous act. But the men did not want to listen to him, and the man seized his concubine and brought her out to them. Okay, so he leaves it also ambiguous. Which man? And they knew her and abused her all night long till morning, and they let her go at daybreak. And the woman came toward morning and fell at the entrance to the house of the man where her master was, as the light was coming up. And her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way. And look, the woman, his concubine, was fallen at the entrance of the house, her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, Get up and let's go. And there was no answer. And he took her on his donkey, and the man arose and went to his place. And he came into his house and took a cleaver and held his concubine and cut her up limb by limb into 12 pieces, and he sent her through all the territory of Israel. And so whoever saw her would say, There has not been, nor has there been such a thing from the day the Israelites came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Pay heed about her, take counsel, and speak. Okay. So, below the line, 23. No, my brothers, no, pray do no harm. These words are quoted from Genesis 19:8. Scurrilous thing, the Hebrew nevalah, is a term generally used for shameful sexual acts. Here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. This replicates Lot's offer of his 2 virgin daughters to the rapists. One does not know which is the more outrageous proposal, offering his daughter to be gang raped or his guest's concubine, over whom he surely does not have jurisdiction. Rape them and do to them whatever you want. The parallel text in Genesis 19 lacks the brutally direct rape or abuse. Its insertion makes us wonder all the more what kind of father the old man is and what kind of host he is to the young woman, whom he appears to regard as a piece of disposable property. The man seized his concubine and brought her out to them. In the event, it is the Levite, prepared to do anything to save his own skin, who thrusts his concubine into the clutches of the rapists. No action follows on the old man's offer of his daughter to the rapists. Perhaps seeing the Levite thrust his concubine outside, he concludes that one victim will suffice. And they knew her and abused her all night long till morning. The source story in Genesis takes place in legendary times when there was supernatural intervention in human affairs. The 2 strangers, because they are divine beings, blind the would-be rapists and secure the safety of those within the house. In the latter-day era of the present story, there is no miraculous intervention. The female victim is gang raped all night long and dies at daybreak from the prolonged violent abuse. Fell at the entrance to the house, she expires in this liminal space, her arms stretching out across the threshold of the house where she might have been safe, her body sprawled on the ground before the house, which is the outside zone of anarchic and destructive lust. 208, her master, only at the end of the story is he called, repeatedly and almost ironically, her master. Arose and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way. He is all brisk business and seems unconcerned about the fate of his concubine. And look, the woman his concubine. Only now does he look down and see her brutalized body, identifying her first as a woman and then as his concubine. Get up and let us go. He at first does not realize that she is dead. This brusque command reveals his utter moral callousness. He expects the woman, after having been gang raped hour after hour, to pick herself up quickly and join him on the journey back. He took her on his donkey. At first we may think he means to give her a decent burial near his home. Took a cleaver and held his concubine and cut her up limb by limb into 12 pieces. Although the intention is to trigger outrage in all the tribes, the number 12 is automatic, but it would actually be 11 because Benjamin is excluded. Over the atrocity that has been perpetrated, the act itself is barbaric, and in biblical terms, it's a desecration of the human body. It should be said, moreover, that the Levite, until this point, has himself been singularly lacking in outrage over the gang rape of his concubine. In any case, the butchering of her body completes the set of images of mutilation and other violence done to the body that begins in the opening chapter of Judges with the chopping off of the thumbs and big toes of the captured king Adoni-Bezek. All right, so I had forgotten that story. But so there's mutilation of his body and now mutilation of this corpse. So the story goes on in chapter 20. Vayetzu kol b'nei Yisrael vatikahel ha'edah ki ish echad lemidan va'ad be'er sheva ve'eretz ha'gil'ad el Adonai ha'mitzpah. So all of the people of Israel gathered as one man from Dan to Beersheba, so from north to south, including the land of Gilead, unto the Lord in Mitzpah. So all the people were gathered by the sanctuary in Mitzpah. 2. Vayit yatzvu pinot kol ha'am, kol shiftei Yisrael. I'm just looking at the English. Kol shiftei Yisrael bikahal am ha'elohim arba ma'ot elef ish ragli sholef charev. So, and the chiefs of all the people of the tribes of Israel, of the congregation, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 men bearing swords. 3, Vayishmeu b'nei Binyamin, ki alu b'nei Yisrael hamitzpah, Vayomru b'nei Yisrael, dabru echa nihiyata hara'ah hazot. And the people of Benjamin heard that the people of Israel came up to Mitzpah. And the people of Israel said, "Speak, how could this terrible thing have happened?" 4. Vaya'an ha'ish halevi, ish ha'isha hanirtzacha, vayomar, hagiv'ata asher levinyamin, bati, ani ufilakshi lalun. So the Levite man, the husband of the woman who was murdered, said, unto Gibeah in Benjamin I came, I and my concubine, to lodge. 5. Vayakumu alai ba'alei hagiv'ah, vayasobu alai et habayit laila, oti dimu laharog, ve'et pilakshi inu vatamot. So the people of Gibeah arose unto me and surrounded me and the house at night. They planned to kill me and my concubine. They tortured or sexually abused, and she died. Or she is dead. Yes, Bess?
Didn't he also come with a servant?
Yes, but he's lying here because they didn't Did they threaten him? They said,
The servant was in the plaza when the old man came, wasn't
yeah,
he?
yeah. Oh no, the people surrounding the house did ask for him to be brought out. So he doesn't say here, well, my life was threatened. Yes, that was true. That's what did happen in the story. But he doesn't say I gave them my concubine instead. That detail he leaves out. But he does say that they sexually abused my wife, my concubine, and she's dead.
It says, bring forth the man that came into thy house that we may know
Yes,
him.
right. That's this guy who's telling the story now.
Right, but what happened with the servant and what's happening with
Oh,
him?
it doesn't matter. The servant
Okay,
doesn't matter.
okay.
Servant doesn't matter. 6. Befilakshi, va'anatcheha, va'ashalcheha, b'chol sidei nachalat Yisrael, ki asu zima unevala b'Yisrael. And I held on to my concubine, and I chopped her and sent her, like I chopped, well, in modern Hebrew, the word there, va'anatcheha, like nituach, is an operation. It's like, so what surgeons do, that's an operation. So it's the same word, but here in the Bible, it's chopping into pieces. Okay, so I held on to my concubine, chopped her into pieces, sent her throughout all the fields of the land of Israel, or the country of Israel, because they did this lewdness and wantonness in Israel. 7. Hine kulchem b'nei Yisrael havu lachem davar ve'etza halom. Here, all of you, the people of Israel, give your advice and counsel now. 8. Vayakom kol ha'am ki ish echad lemor lo nelech ish la'ohalo velo nasur ish leveto. And all the people rose up as one and said, we will not go back home, and we will not go back home. In other words, we will not go back to our tents, we will not go back home. Ve'ata zeh hadavar asher na'aseh lagiv'ah aleha begoral. And now, this is the thing that we will do to Gibeah. We will go against it by lot. 10. V'lakachnu Asara anashim leme'ah lechol shiftei Yisrael ume'ah la'elef ve'elef lirevava lakachat seda la'am la'asot levo'am legeva binyamin kechol hanevala asher asa beYisrael. And we will take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000, to fetch food or equipment or sustenance for the people, that they may do when they go to Geva or Gibeah in Benjamin, according to the wantonness that they did in Israel. So we're going to do to the people of Gibeah what Gibeah did to this concubine. 11. Vaye'asef kol ish Yisrael el ha'ir ki ish echad chaverim. So all the people of Israel gathered at the city as one man, friends. That's chaverim as friends, but knit together as one man. All right, let's stop here and look at the commentary on this. So, bottom of 303 on the bottom right. A general assembly of the tribes was held at Mitzpah, and an army mustered to go on a punitive expedition against Benjamin. The demand that the perpetrators of the crime be given up was rejected by the, okay, we won't read the introduction. On to the left on 304, went out to prepare for war. Congregation, Adah is a technical term for the whole people. As one man, see on chapter 6:16. Here the meaning is without exception. From Dan even to Beersheba, the extreme northern and southern limits of the country. For Dan, see chapter 18:7, and for Beersheba and Joshua 15. Gilead, all the tribes east of the Jordan, with the single exception of the men of Yavesh. See chapter 21. Mitzpah in Benjamin, they gathered there because of its memorable associations with the great victory of Joshua's day. See Joshua 18. Chiefs, literally corners. Others interpret this literally, namely each tribe stood in its own individual corner. Let's say the word is pinot, and it's just translated, it literally means corners, but it's translated as chiefs. That drew sword, ready to punish the offending tribe in battle if need be. The assembly was of a military character, but charged with a moral mission, hence the phrase, the people of God. Now the children of Benjamin heard. This is a parenthetical insert describing Benjamin's reaction to the gathering. Although Benjamin knew that Israel had gathered, they did not care to punish the guilty, nor did they come to clarify their position. Others explain that although the Benjaminites knew of the gathering, they were not officially summoned. Therefore, the Israelites were punished. Tell us, literally speak. Gibeah, in the Hebrew, it stands at the beginning of the clause for emphasis. 305, men, literally lords, thought to have slain, that such was their intention in 1922, may naturally be inferred from the fate which befell his concubine. Your advice and counsel, literally a word in counsel, that is, express your view on what to do about this atrocious incident. We will go up. The verb is not in the Hebrew and is inferred from the context. By lot, the purpose of the lot is explained in the next verse. A tenth of the fighting force to be selected by lot will be detailed to supply the army with provisions. They may do, they alludes to the people, the fighting men. Gibeah, the form in the Hebrew, is Geba. They have wrought on 306. The subject is the Benjaminites. The city, Gibeah. Knit together, literally companions. The root signifies to join together, that is, not as individual tribes, but as one man. So let's read Alter on this.
I have to say, it
Yes.
bothers me that he had the choice of his servant or his concubine to offer to the bad guy.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not looking at it as a woman, but as saying he had two people.
No, that's true, and servant is never an option. And also in Genesis, you assume Lot has servants too, but that's not an option either. So it says something about the status of women in those days, that they're even lowlier than slaves or servants. So let's look at Alter. 209, as one man, this phrase recurs in a story emphasizing the solidarity of the 11 tribes in their opposition to Benjamin. 400,000 sword-wielding foot soldiers. Although military numbers in all these stories are exaggerated, this figure is especially fantastic. At no time in the history of ancient Israel could the nation have deployed this large an army. Not sure how scholars know that. About what the size of the people of Israel was at the time. I don't know. Husband of the murdered woman. Only now does the narrative spell out that the night-long gang rape is tantamount to murder. I came with my concubine. The Hebrew uses I came in the singular, followed by a second grammatical subject of the verb my concubine, a form that indicates that the first subject of the verb is primary. The Levite remains true to character, making the woman ancillary to himself. 210, me they thought to kill. In fact, the men of Gibeah sought to have sex with him, a detail the Levite prefers not to mention, substituting for it a purported direct threat to his life. And my concubine they raped, he says nothing about the fact that he himself thrust her out the door into the hands of the rapists. I seized my concubine and caught her up. He has already said that she died, but this way of putting it creates the macabre impression of his cutting up the person, not the corpse. Offer of a word of counsel here. Obviously, the word he assumes his tale will elicit is a resolution of vengeance. 10 men out of 100, though it seems evident that 10% of the assembled troops are to provide logistical support to the warriors, the wording 10 out of 100, 100 out of 1,000, 1,000 out of 10,000 is a bit confusing. For those coming to Benjamin's Gibeah, the translation follows the reading in the Septuagint. The Masoretic text looks garbled here, for their coming. Okay, it's 10:26. We'll stop here for today. We'll continue this gruesome story next Friday. Yeah, next Friday. We will have class the following Friday, the 27th. I'll be away. So we have class next week, and the 27th we will be off. So have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Good Shabbos.
And Shabbat Shalom, yes. And maybe we'll see you at dinner tonight, except for Deborah.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Good Shabbos. Bye-bye.